Welcome back, folks, to WrestleRant. I am Graham Jason Matthews, and here today we're breaking down the 2013 WWE Payback pay-per-view as seen on the WWE Network. Loved watching the show the first time around 2 years ago. Had a lot of fun watching it back just a couple days ago, and I thought this was a great show on the whole. The year 2013 in wrestling, specifically WWE, was not amazing by any stretch of the imagination, but I did enjoy the summer. I thought this pay-per-view, as well as the next night's Raw, really kicked off the summer season in WWE on a really hot note, no pun intended, on a high note. It was excellent. I loved the show through and through, and like I said, had a lot of fun watching it back on the network just a few days ago. So kicking off the show, not on the show itself, but I do want to mention this. Go out of your way to watch this match. It's not on the network version, because the network version obviously only kicks off from the official start of the pay-per-view. But you can find it on YouTube. The kickoff match for Payback, Sheamus versus Damien Sandow, an excellent matchup. And I would go so far as to say one of, if not the best kickoff match in WWE history. Maybe not as good as Usos versus The Shield from the following month of Money in the Bank, but still a great match nevertheless. You know, Damien Sandow, this was a month before he won the SmackDown Money in the Bank briefcase at the pay-per-view of the same name, only 1 month beforehand. So this was a great way for him to kind of kick off his singles star off to a very strong start. Although his singles career off to a very strong start. Although it never ended up going anywhere. He ended up jobbing and he lost the world title match, but whatever. A great feud, great match. Really enjoyed Sheamus versus Sandow on the pre-show. Like I said, you cannot watch it on the network. You have to go out of your way to watch it on YouTube or elsewhere, but I would strongly suggest doing so. I thought it was a great match. So kicking off the show itself, a triple threat match for the Intercontinental Championship. Wade Barrett defending against both The Miz and Curtis Axel. Now originally, it was supposed to be Miz and Fandango, but Fandango suffered a concussion around the same time that Dolph Ziggler did, which kept him out of action for a while, and I'll get to that in a little while when I get to his match. But yeah, Fandango's concussion, I think he suffered it maybe a week or two before the pay-per-view, and they replaced him at the last minute with Axel, and I don't think Axel was going to do anything on this pay-per-view regardless. So I don't know, what presence he would have had, but it was cool. I mean, it actually ended up working out for the better. I know Axel's reign was not amazing or anything like that as Intercontinental Champion, but I mean, and it really all goes back to this point. I mean, had Fandango competed, I mean, I could sure as hell bet you that he would have won. He would have won the Intercontinental Championship. Whether that would have saved his push or, done the title any wonders, any favors, I'm not really sure. I guess we'll never really know. But I thought it was a great moment, though, especially considering that this was not supposed to happen to begin with. And the show fell on Father's Day, June 16th, 2013. So it was an amazing moment for Curtis Axel to win the title that his father once held and made, notorious to me, that made it prestigious on Father's Day. So I thought it made for an amazing moment, a great way to kick off the show. And the match itself, I thought, was actually really, really good. A lot of people didn't really have high expectations going into it, considering, the title by this point, Wade Barrett had been holding it. Sans the quick title change right after WrestleMania, which made no sense. The IC title for quite a while, for almost the entirety of 2013, meant nothing. So no one cared about the matches. And the build going into this match, like I said, it was all about Fandango and Barrett and Miz. Fandango got injured, so the match really didn't have much build going into it. And the Chicago crowd, which made for an electric atmosphere all night long, was very anti-Miz. They were very pro-Axel. Didn't really care much about Barrett, but they were very pro-Axel here, and they popped huge for the title change. I like the finish, too. It was very creative. Miz had Barrett in the figure 4 leg lock, which he was obviously using at that time. I think he still uses it now. I can't remember. But it was like his go-to move as a babyface. And he had that locked in on Barrett. Everyone thought Barrett was going to tap and Miz was going to win the belt. And then out of nowhere, Axel, who was just hanging out on the outside, comes on in when Miz still has the move locked in on Barrett. He pins Barrett's shoulders down to the mat, picks up the 1-2-3, kind of like almost exactly like how Becky Lynch got, she pinned Bayley in that triple threat match with Charlotte a couple months ago on NXT to become the new number 1 contender to the NXT Women's Championship. Almost the exact same finish, but I love it. It was creative. It was original. I didn't see it coming. It protected Barrett. It protected Miz, gave a huge win to Axel, and like I said before, a monumental moment for Curtis Axel winning that championship that his father once held on Father's Day. So an amazing way of kicking off the show. Really enjoyed that. Up next, for the Divas Championship, AJ Lee contending for the gold against Kaitlyn, and what is probably my favorite Divas match of all time. And in the time that I've been a fan since 2008 anyway, and I'm not counting the women's matches from NXT, because those are the women's matches, they're not the Divas, or yet anyway. So, those matches aside, this is probably my favorite Divas match ever, that I've ever seen anyway. And here's the reason why, because, everyone knows that listens to these reviews, I'm a sucker for a good story, and that's exactly what this matchup had. I know they were building up the feud in the weeks going into this matchup, and, AJ Lee had the whole secret admirer thing with Kaitlyn, whatever else. But if you really think about it, and I'll talk about the commentary in a second, and what I thought was in a great state at that period in time, this feud goes back to late 2010, 3 years, and I was raving about it then. I'll rave about it now, because I thought it was excellent in the long-term storytelling they had with these two women. AJ Lee and Kaitlyn, and they, like I said, they talked about this during the course of the contest on commentary. These two women came into WWE together on the third season of NXT, back when it was still a crappy competition show, obviously not what it is now. And they came up together on that show. They got signed to SmackDown together. They were a tag team for a while in 2011 as the Chick Busters, if you can recall. In 2012, when AJ went crazy, she went off the deep end when Daniel Bryan dumped her. She just went berserk on Kaitlyn. They just cut all ties, and AJ just went on to do her own thing. And then throughout AJ's time as a crazy chick, as CM Punk would call her, and during her time as Raw GM, they would cross paths, in backstage segments and in the ring and stuff like that. And they would always tease a match between the two. They never really fully delivered on it. They had a match maybe once or twice in an episode of SmackDown or something. But other than that, though, they never really had that full-on feud. And I thought this is something they can always go back to down the line. And in my booking of it, I booked this in late 2012, that what they should have done was have Kaitlyn beat Eve for the Divas Championship, and what she did in her hometown in early 2013. And then AJ beats Kaitlyn for the title for her first Divas Championship in her hometown in New Jersey, her home state, Unionsdale or whatever it was, at WrestleMania 29. And of course, they didn't go that route, and maybe it was better they waited a little while, because this was still a special moment. Chicago is an amazing crowd. And WrestleMania 29 was not the greatest show anyway, so maybe that wasn't the best of stages to do it at. But, this match had so much riding on it, and that's what I loved about it. And they harpered back to those old tactics, their old, the feud building up to this point, their old story. The commentators touched upon this. And I want to talk about this very briefly. But, we always, give the commentators a lot of flack nowadays for the terrible state of commentary. And rightfully so, because it's not great. You can half blame the commentators themselves. You can half blame the people that are producing them in their ears, whether it's Kevin Dunn or Vince McMahon or whoever. But back in 2013, this was right before the Authority angle, which they were heavily foreshadowing at this period in time with all the, the back and forth between Triple H and Vince and Stephanie. That was a whole disaster and kind of a waste of time. But with the Authority angle, when that happened, JBL became the number one fan of the Authority. He was always cheerleading them on commentary, and since that point, he has not been as good. He's been a little bit better as of late, but more often than not, he can be just unbearable to listen to behind the booth. But back before that angle began, I don't know what it was. Maybe they just told him to become the cheerleader for the Authority. I have no idea. But before that, though, from when he came back in late 2012 to this point, he was so goddamn effective behind the booth that it was so much fun listening to him, because he would always call the action. He was still a heel commentator, but it wasn't like he was overbearing or annoying. I think the state of commentary back in 2013 is pretty underrated. I thought it really came a long way from when, after Jerry Lawler's heart attack. I mean, it was great when it was JR, Cole, and JBL. But even when JR came back, Jerry Lawler came back in late 2012, and it was Jerry, Michael, and JBL, it was still very, very good. I mean, there would be times. It wasn't amazing or anything like that, but there would be times when they were bad. But more often than not, though, it was solid, and they did not distract in the commentary. And it sucks, because the product was not that great at that period in time, and we could really use a good commentary team now that the product is doing a lot better than it was 2 years ago. But JBL, and here's a prime example. During this matchup, and only a couple of days before this, they were really, stressing the fact that, emphasizing how in the week before this was like the worst week of Kaitlyn's life. Because on Raw, it was revealed that her longtime secret admirer was none other than Big E. It was all a huge hoax constructed by AJ. It was, they were all in on it, whatever. And then she was heartbroken by that in storyline. On SmackDown, she went berserk on the referee, and she went nuts on Oksana. She had to get suspended or find an absurd amount of money, like $10,000 or something like that in storyline. So she was really at that mental disadvantage coming into this matchup, and JBL specifically really, really stressed that, really emphasized on that fact during the course of this contest, specifically down the stretch when after Kaitlyn hit the spear on AJ, which looked great because AJ sells that spear like a champ. After she hit that, instead of going for the 1-2-3, she picked AJ up, blew her a kiss, much like AJ did a couple days before on Raw, and then slammed her head down in the mat, and then got, went for the cover, only for AJ to kick out at 2. So JBL was saying, why would they do that, or why did she do that? It was a rookie mistake. She should have just gone for the 1-2-3 instead of just kind of gloating in the moment like a heel would or whatever, etc., etc. And it really not only protected her, and it was just so great in the storyline that the commentary, they really made that moment perfect. And then AJ would bounce back. She would throw Kaitlyn right into the turnbuckle post. AJ would lock in the Black Widow, get the tap-out victory to capture her first Divas Championship. And I know people, give her shit for having, the date of when she won the belt on the back of her neck, whatever. And I think people, when they make fun of that, even when I'm a huge Alex Riley fan, but even when he made fun of that, I thought it was stupid. But, why can you blame her? Can you really blame her for all the hardships that she had to go through to get to that point? And I'm obviously an AJ fan, but you got to respect the fact that this girl went through everything. And I know she was on the main roster on WWE TV for about 3 years, but even before that, she was in developmental for about a year or two. All the stuff she did on the indies, it was a really long road to get to that point for AJ to finally become Divas Champion. And it was a great moment. Like I said, that's why this matchup is likely my favorite Divas match of all time. There's not really many matches that come close, other than the AJ Page matches from last year, or the Stephanie and Brie matches, or from SummerSlam. But even then, I thought this matchup, the story going into it, for 3 years writing on it, the execution of it was great. They got time. They got about 10 minutes, which is unheard of in today's day and age with the Divas. And then just the moment itself with AJ winning the gold, I thought was great. The crowd popped for it, and it was a really cool moment, a really enjoyable matchup. They had a nice little feud over the championship from that point forward, with it wrapping up at SummerSlam in that mixed tag team match with Dolph and Kaitlyn versus AJ and Big E. But I thought everything about this was perfect, from the build-up to the matchup to the moment of AJ winning. Loved every single second of it, so I would definitely suggest for any women's wrestling fans out there, or for a wrestling fan in general, you will like this matchup, and easily one of the brightest spots from this pay-per-view, which was overall excellent on the whole, which is really saying something. With all the other great stuff that happened on the show, for me to praise this match as much as I am is truly a sentiment to how great it truly was. Up next for the United States Championship, Dean Ambrose defending against Kane. So of all the matches on this card, this was kind of like the least built. I think they had a match on Raw maybe the week before this, and Kane maybe won via countout or disqualification or something, setting up the U.S. title match for this pay-per-view. It was a fine little way of getting them both on the show. It was a good match. It just didn't stand out with everything else happening on the show, with 3 title changes, the return of CM Punk, a 3 stages of hell match. It didn't really stand out. In any other pay-per-view, it probably would have been one of the better matches. But, for what it was okay. I wasn't a fan of the finish, but I didn't really hate it either. Dean Ambrose hitting a DDT on Kane on the outside, and then rolling back in the ring to get the count-out victory. Like, why not just have him pin Kane? Because I know they did the rematch next night on Raw, but it's not like Ambrose beat him then either. I think Kane may have won via DQ. And I was fine with it at that time, because I figured they were building to, from what it seemed like anyway, a Shield versus Brothers of Destruction match at SummerSlam, which had all the tools to be amazing. Because if you can recall, it was right after WrestleMania when the Shield took out The Undertaker on some random episode of SmackDown, I think in England, when Undertaker returned for that one-off match against Ambrose. And I figured that's what they were building to, and maybe that's what the original plan was. I guess we'll never really know. But what I read at that time was that maybe Undertaker was still hurt and they just didn't know it or whatever, and the match never ended up coming to fruition, and then Undertaker wasn't seen until February of the next year when he returned for the match against Brock at WrestleMania 30. So they never really wrapped up his rivalry with the Shield or Dean Ambrose or whoever. So I was kind of fine with this matchup going to a countout, because I figured they were either going to blow it off the next night on Raw or, blow it off at SummerSlam. And again, they never ended up getting to that point, so it was kind of a weird finish. But for what it was, Ambrose, it's not like Kane won via countout. Ambrose did win the match. I would have rather he pinned him, but for what it was a good match. Nothing too special, but I enjoyed it. And right before the World Championship matchup, we had a vignette for the returning Rob Van Dam to WWE. So when I was watching the show the first time around, back when people would still stream shows on the internet and find all these different links and whatever else, wherever I was watching the show on my laptop, whatever wherever I was watching it, it was cutting in and out. It was a terrible quality stream. And the match, I was getting bits and pieces of the U.S. title match, and I wasn't freaking out because the match, was, like I said, it was there. If there was any match to miss from this show, it was certainly that one. So I wasn't too mad, but once the match finished up and I see these bits and pieces of this vignette, including RVD, I'm freaking the fuck out, thinking RVD's coming back, and some people thought maybe it's an RVD DVD, but then at the end of the little video package, it said that Rob Van Dam was returning at Money in the Bank in Philadelphia the next month. And of course, this was the first time that we had seen RVD in WWE in about, 6 years, since 2007. And it was a cool moment for everyone. Twitter is blown up. But for me specifically, in that, having watched wrestling or having gotten into WWE in April of 2008, I never got to see Rob Van Dam in WWE or hear that awesome theme song, One of a Kind, one of my favorite themes of all time. Because, I watched him in TNA. He was good over there. He had, that one little run as world champion. But other than that, though, he really did not do much of note over in TNA. He was X Division champion for a while, but that was at a point when the belt meant nothing, and it still means nothing now. But other than that, though, he did not really do much of note in TNA. And I was kind of just bored of him over there. So when he came back to WWE, I was super excited with all the potential matchups that he could possibly have. So I thought that was great. I was really excited for that. That, if the first hour of the show wasn't hot enough, then we get this exciting vignette for the return of Rob Van Dam in 1 month's time at the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. So I thought that was fantastic. Loved it. No one saw it coming. I know there were rumors of him, when the moment that his TNA contract expired in early 2013, there were rumors of him coming over to WWE at some point. It was just kind of a matter of when and not if. And it finally happened on this show, or at least it would be announced on this show. Like I said, I went crazy. Great moment. And the video package is included in the network version of this pay-per-view when you watch the show back on the network. So up next, for the World Heavyweight Championship, Alberto Del Rio, contending for the gold against Dolph Ziggler. And this matchup I really, really enjoyed. Ziggler and Del Rio have never had a bad match from my memory, and that's saying something, because they've had about 1 million matches in their time. But here's the thing, though, because Dolph Ziggler was at a disadvantage coming into this matchup. It was 1 month beforehand that Ziggler was injured. He was concussed, inadvertently at the hands of Jack Swagger on that episode of SmackDown. He sat on the sidelines for about a month, and this was, he may have wrestled the match before this pay-per-view, I think on maybe an episode of SmackDown, but this was, to my knowledge, his first singles match back since suffering the injury. And they kind of played that up a little bit, the commentators, like I said, who were very effective on the show, and I thought they were great. Very spot on. They were all about the action, all about the storytelling. I thought it was awesome. But they did tell the story that Ziggler was not 100%. He was still feeling the after effects of the concussion from a month earlier. He was not 100% yet. They didn't know if he was ready to go. So that definitely obviously played into the finish, and I'll talk about that in a second. And Del Rio, who was not, overly booed when he came into this matchup. Even the crowd was red hot for when Ricardo introduced him. He was not the favorite. Obviously, Ziggler is, in that he's a very pro-IWC guy, and the hardcore fans love him. And I will certainly say this. I said this then, I'll say it now. When they did the double turn in this matchup, I don't know if there was any other place, aside from maybe like New York or Philadelphia or one of the other, hardcore fan-based crowds or whatever, like England or something. Other than that, other than those few cities, I don't know if there was anywhere else they could have pulled this double turn off. I believe, to my knowledge, the first double turn since Austin and Hart, Stone Cold Steve Austin and Bret Hart at WrestleMania 13, also in Chicago, coincidentally enough. Almost, how many years early? Almost 16 years earlier or whatever it was. So, and I thought this was excellent. Ziggler has always been great at selling, but he's never done it in a sympathetic fashion, but he did it on this show. Del Rio, who was relentless, just beating the shit out of Dolph Ziggler just with his kicks from hell, going to town on Dolph Ziggler and just not holding anything back. He was so desperate to win that World Heavyweight Championship. And AJ at ringside, Biggie was banned from ringside at one point, but AJ with her reactions, with her just going very worrisome about the state and health of Dolph Ziggler, with Del Rio having no regard for the health or state of Dolph Ziggler. He just does not care. And then Ricardo just egging Alberto on from ringside. This was excellent, excellently executed. To take a phrase from Bret Hart's little playbook, from his catchphrase, I thought this was awesome. I thought everything about it was great. And then the match, although it was well wrestled, they would have better matches down the line, like in Money in the Bank. But this was the best matchup they've told from a storyline standpoint. With all the, like I said before, I'm a sucker for a stellar story. And that's exactly what they told in this matchup with Del Rio in just one night, in one match, turning this guy heel, which he's always been better as anyway. He's always been better as a heel. Dolph Ziggler, it was something new for him. Like, at that time, I didn't really see the need in switching the two, but Del Rio is obviously much more comfortable as a heel than he was as a babyface. Then Dolph Ziggler, he's still a babyface to this day because he's so goddamn over. It's not the fact that I think Ziggler is a better heel, but I think he has a bigger reaction, a bigger connection to the crowd as a babyface, obviously, because everyone loves the guy. So I thought this was awesome. Del Rio just having no regard for the health and state of Dolph Ziggler, just going to town on his head, and Ziggler picking up some hope spots and the crowd going crazy. As well as the crowd was sitting on the edge of their seats, waiting for Ziggler to bounce back and win the World Heavyweight Champion, or retain the World Championship, hitting the zigzag at one point. But it wasn't enough. Del Rio, just with those countless kicks to the head, eventually, they had their toll on Ziggler, who had to succumb to defeat Del Rio, the new World Heavyweight Champion. So I, among many others, was very pissed initially when Del Rio won the World Heavyweight Championship, but then I caught myself, hook, line, and sinker from WWE for someone like a hardcore fan to feel anger towards this was awesome. Like, if for any hardcore fan to feel angry about Ziggler winning the world or losing the World Heavyweight Championship, it really went to show how well this whole angle was executed. That's what they wanted you to feel, because Del Rio, like I said, if Del Rio was still a babyface, I would have been pissed, and maybe WWE had a plan maybe this was the plan all along, or they didn't feel that Ziggler was 100%, legitimately, and they felt like he couldn't, go as World Heavyweight Champion for the time being. And at the time, I loved it, and I still love the matchup to this day. The overall program I was not a fan of, because I figured, okay, putting Ziggler in chase mode and having Del Rio as the heel champion is awesome. That's the way it should be told. It's a lot more interesting than having Del Rio as the babyface in chase mode and Ziggler as the heel, or Del Rio as the babyface champion and Ziggler in chase mode, whatever. Because I figured the end game was Ziggler winning that belt back at SummerSlam, in which he didn't. I know he finished up the feud with AJ and Big E at that pay-per-view, and I thought maybe at Night of Champions they would have done the matchup, but they put RVD in the title picture instead. So obviously I had a little bit too much faith in WWE. Stupid of me to think that, obviously. But I figured the end game was Ziggler winning back the World Heavyweight Championship on this, down the line. Obviously not the case, but still, I thought for one night anyway, I thought this angle was awesome. The way they did this was excellent, in that Del Rio walked away as a hated heel. He came out afterwards to cut a promo on the crowd. His full-on, full-fledged heel turn came the next night on Raw when he cut a promo on the crowd saying, when Ziggler cashed in a couple months ago, you guys were fully on his side. I've done everything for you, so I'm turning my back on you guys now, not the other way around. Whatever. And then Ziggler was a very sympathetic babyface. So everything about the whole feud early on was very well done, and I enjoyed it. So I thought the match was great. Told a stellar story, like I said before. Del Rio, the new World Heavyweight Champion. Although I was initially angered with it, it made sense from a storyline standpoint to put Dolph Ziggler as the newly turned babyface in chase mode. So I thought it was awesome. So really go out of your way to watch this matchup, because I thought it was really, really well done from start to finish. Up next, the homecoming of Chicago's own CM Punk. 2.5 months in the making. CM Punk walking out of WWE in storyline, not legitimately. 8 days removed from WrestleMania, saying, I lost to The Rock at Royal Rumble. I lost to him at Elimination Chamber. I failed to end the streak at WrestleMania. I don't know what's next for me. And then he walks off. So there was a lot of speculation that there would be a double turn here with CM. He would turn babyface anyway, but with Punk going face and Jericho going heel, maybe he's a new Paul Heyman guy. And we did get a double turn on this show, but it was not with this matchup, so that kind of ruled out that possibility. But when Punk came out, his music hit, the place went apeshit, as only one would expect. So I thought this was great, an excellent matchup, and I really enjoyed watching it back. Because like I said before, whatever website or stream I was watching this pay-per-view on, it was cutting in and out. It was so shitty, so it was not really that good at all. And so I really wasn't able to fully enjoy this matchup because I only caught bits and pieces of it. So watching in full for the first time ever, or for the first time since it initially happened 2 years ago, was really enjoyable. I thought it was a great matchup, as only Punk and Jericho could deliver. Very reminiscent of their feud from 2012, 1 year prior, and Punk was beloved. I mean, Jericho got his fair share of boos and his fair share of, cheers and whatever, but this matchup was all about CM Punk. For a guy that had not stepped in the ring in over 2.5 months, showed no signs of ring rust, fully tanned, fully rested. I know this is at a point in his career where he just did not give a shit, as he said in the shoot interview, the podcast with Colt Cabana a couple months ago, and for the remainder of his run from this point until he left in early 2014, he just didn't care. And that was kind of evident from some of his mannerisms in this matchup. But he was still as great of a wrestler as ever. I thought this was an excellent matchup. The constant finishers, like Jericho hitting 2 code breakers, not one but 2, one off with Jericho jumping off, or with Punk jumping off the top rope, and Jericho catching with the code breaker. I thought that was a cool spot. Punk locking in the Anaconda Vice on Jericho while standing up, hitting maybe 3 GTSs. He hit one on Jericho at one point. Jericho kicked out. So then we get to the end when Punk hit the GTS on Jericho, but in order to put him away, Jericho was still standing. He bounced off the turnbuckle after Punk hit him with a GTS, the first or second time, whatever. And then he hit another GTS on him, the third of the matchup, to get the 1, 2, 3. Place exploded, and he would celebrate for the next 5 to 10 minutes. So I thought that was great. The crowd was apeshit for it, and it was a really, really good match. From a storyline standpoint, it didn't really accomplish anything. It wasn't until the next night on Raw that Punk would say, Paul, I don't need you anymore. And that would kind of jumpstart the whole feud between Punk and Lesnar, that great feud for the summer of 2013. But yeah, from a storyline standpoint, this matchup did not really accomplish much. But from an in-ring action standpoint, I thought it was great. Probably, or easily, the best match of the night. And I mean, would it have done them harm to do this matchup in the main event over the WWE title match? Probably not, but Cena and Ryback, the WWE Championship match, did not get top billing at Extreme Rules, so they probably wanted to do it on this pay-per-view, and Cena would not main event the Money in the Bank pay-per-view in the following month, so probably was for the better anyway, that they main evented the show with that matchup between Cena and Ryback. But this was easily the best wrestled match on this show, and much like everything else up to this point, I thought it was really, really good. Up next, for the WWE Tag Team titles, The Shield defending against Daniel Bryan and Randy Orton. Pretty good matchup. I was surprised with how much time they ended up getting, about 12 minutes. Because you figure, right before the main event and right after the red hot CM Punk and Jericho matchup, it would be an easy filler match with the champions easily retaining whatever. And this was obviously just telling some small tidbit of a bigger story with Orton and Daniel Bryan, because Orton's quote-unquote heel turn was rumored for a long time now, and people thought it happened on the show or the next night on Raw. And Daniel Bryan and Orton had a lot of good matches on Raw and SmackDown following this pay-per-view, but it wasn't until his full heel turn, his full-fledged heel turn, did not come until SummerSlam a couple months later. But that's what this matchup was mostly about. There was no official turn from either guy, like I said before, but there were some subtle teases at an Orton heel turn, or just not having any regard for Bryan whatsoever. And Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins taking advantage and retaining the tag team titles, taking advantage of their of them not being a cohesive unit. But even from a wrestling standpoint, I thought this was a pretty good matchup. And the tag team division, I think, is pretty underrated. I mean, a lot of people say that Cody Rhodes and Goldust, when they started teaming in late 2013, saved the division. But even before then, though, my mic just dropped for a second. But even before then, I thought the tag team division was great for most of 2013 with the Shield as champions. I mean, you look at the matches they had with Bryan and Orton, with Bryan and Kane, with the Usos that summer. I thought the tag team division really took a turn for the better. You can go back so far as when Team Hell No won the belts and Night of Champions in 2012. I think from that point on, the division was in a much better state than it was, right after Cody Rhodes and Goldust dropped the titles in 2014 or whatever it was. Still, though, good matchup. Nothing really that much to write home about, but the end result was the right one, with the Shield retaining the titles, and further teases for a feud between Daniel Bryan and Randy Orton down the line. So we get to the main event, a 3 Stages of Hell matchup. For the WWE Championship, John Cena, defending champion, taking on the challenger, Ryback. So the first stage was a lumberjack matchup with the heroes of WWE superstars, as I like to say. Surrounding the ring, we had appearances from Alex Riley, Zack Ryder, Ted DiBiase, 3MB, Justin Gabriel, Sin Cara, and all these other people who you obviously just don't care about. Speaking of Sin Cara, though, I think the best part of this entire stage, it was a pretty good matchup, and I think this matchup was even better than their last man standing match. You put Cena and Ryback in a standard one-on-one matchup, it probably would not have been as good. So that's probably why they put them as many stip matches as they did, whether it was a tables match or 3 stages of hell or last man standing. Cena and Ryback were so much better when they had stipulations to work with. They had good chemistry in that respect. The feud itself was not great, but I thought the matches were pretty good, though, and this one included. The Lumberjack match, standard singles match for the most part. The Lumberjacks is kind of, the heels would attack John Cena when he went to the outside, but when Ryback was tossed to the outside, everyone went to town on Ryback. For a guy that was bullying everybody, they just wanted to beat the crap out of him, and it was a great moment. The crowd popped big when Ryback got tossed to the outside, and all the Lumberjacks, all 30 of them, just went apeshit on Ryback. But here's the best part of the entire stage, though. John Cena goes to the top rope, and he goes airborne on the entire Lumberjacks. You know your typical spot when you have all the Lumberjacks on the outside, and one man jumps the outside, and all 30 of them fall down, you know? So John Cena, and they replayed this spot a million times over. It was not that special, because Cena had jumped from the top rope before. It was a cool moment. It wasn't anything for the highlight reel, 10 years down the line or anything like that in John Cena's career. But anyway, he jumps off the top rope on top of the Lumberjacks, and easily the best part of this entire stage, if not the entire matchup, was the replay. And like I said, they would replay this over and over and over. And you can't really catch it the first time because you don't see it. But when everyone falls down, it takes another 10 seconds or so for Sin Cara, Botch Cara, to fall down with the rest of the Lumberjacks. You just see him standing there, like I said, not when it first happens, but in the replays, maybe in the last replay too, it's a lot more evident. You see Sin Cara just standing there. After everyone else falls down, Sin Cara's standing there looking around, seeing that everyone else fell down, and then he falls down with the rest of them. It was so great. It was so terrible that it was hilarious. Like I said, you have to go out of your way to watch that moment. If only for this entire show, go out of your way to see that moment when Sin Cara just randomly falls down. That was truly one for the highlight reel. I thought that was great. So we get to the next stage, or Ryback beats Cena clean. That was weird. I was surprised by that when he locked John. He picked him up with the shell shock. He got him for the 1, 2, 3, and he won the first stage. And it's funny too because the commentators were really emphasizing the fact that John Cena had never beaten Ryback via pinfall, and that was kind of the whole point going into this matchup. He did not pin him. He beat him in the tables match by putting him through a table, and then he put him through the top of the ambulance. And again, not pinning him. And what was the point? I mean, Ryback had already been pinned by the Shield. He was pinned by Mark Henry at WrestleMania. So obviously they didn't care about the guy at this point. So why not have him pinned by John Cena? And I know there might have been rumors of them doing a rematch at Money in the Bank, where God forbid we had a rematch again after 3 pay-per-views in a row. And the feud had obviously overstayed its welcome by this point. But at Money in the Bank, I guess they were going to do a rematch where Cena finally beat Ryback, and thankfully they did not go that route, and they ended up going with Cena and Mark Henry instead. Excuse me. And then down the line, they would have their matches on Raw and SmackDown. They would have Cena beating him via pinfall, maybe on an episode of SmackDown. So I'm sure it happened at some point. It just didn't happen on the show, again, which was weird because that was kind of the narrative they were trying to tell. But anyway, good first stage, Lumberjack match. Ryback wins via the 1, 2, 3, via the shell shocked. Tables match, a good match. They had a lot of experience because they faced each other in dark matches almost every single and they faced each other in tables matches in almost every single dark match after Raw and on the house shows and whatever. So they had a lot of time to perfect it. And that was good too. John Cena won there with an AA through the table to Ryback. And then through the ambulance match, in the third and final stage, it was good. I mean, it wasn't anything amazing or anything like that. Ambulance matches have never really been my forte. I know we got one between Wyatt and Ambrose. We had one between Cena and Ryback, I think in 2012, a year before this. They're just boring to me. I mean, they can be brutal, they can be hardcore, whatever. I don't know, it's kind of like the stretcher match. I think even stretcher matches, which are also not that enjoyable, are better than these kind of matches, because I'm just waiting for them to put the other through the ambulance. And I don't know, there's just a lot of brawling, and it's not my forte. And this was kind of like that. I mean, they did some hardcore stuff near the ambulance truck, through the ambulance car, where Ryback tossed Cena into the windshield, and they broke the windshield. Ryback punching his arm through a glass window. Ryback being tossed into one of the car doors and it having it completely fall off its hinges. Stuff like that was cool. It was not a great finish to the matchup, and then we get to the top of the ambulance, and Cena brings him up there and delivers an AA to Ryback through the top of the ambulance to win. And again, does not pin Ryback, but I guess that's his way, and I guess the top of the ambulance gave way pretty easily and was not supported very well. But yeah, Cena wins the fall. He wins the matchup, still the WWE Champion. The best match to close the show on? No. I mean, on any other pay-per-view, it would have been fine. Just on a really, really hot pay-per-view like this one, where every other matchup exceeded expectations, it was kind of the wrong match to close the show with. But, it was still good, though. I enjoyed it. Probably the best match that Cena and Ryback had. And, a decent way of going off the show. So on the whole, I thought this was a stellar pay-per-view. One of, if not the best pay-per-view of 2013. Probably not as good as... I thought SummerSlam had a better overall card, but I thought that had more monumental moments. I thought just the show on the whole was stellar. I was so pumped going into it. I was pumped watching it. I was pumped watching it back, watching it a few days ago on the network. My first time watching this pay-per-view back in full since it initially aired 2 years ago. So I thought it was great, and you should do the same. Watch it back on the WWE Network. I know Payback is already come and gone, this year's installment anyway, which was also very, very good. And Payback I was not sold on, and I said this at that time that, the June pay-per-views, there was a very long streak of bad June pay-per-views in WWE. The up until 2009 when we had the Bash, not that great of a show. 2010 Fatal 4-Way, not a good show at all. 2011 it was Capital Punishment, a shit show. No Way Out in 2012, again a shit show. So they had a lot of pressure going into this pay-per-view. Will it deliver or will it not deliver? And it absolutely delivered. It exceeded expectations. And the 2014 Payback was great. The 2015 Payback was great. So the Payback pay-per-view has, as a matter of fact, has become one of my favorite events of the year. I'm not going to say it's my favorite pay-per-view of all time or anything like that, but it's not even my top 3 favorite pay-per-views. But it is one pay-per-view to look forward to every year. With the strong streak of great shows that Payback has guaranteed from 2013 onward, and this kind of kicked off that strong streak with an awesome show. So to go back and watch it, the Chicago crowd was great as well. Always an awesome atmosphere, and that definitely enhanced my enjoyment of this event. But yeah, that is Payback 2013, awesome show, and look forward to watching Payback 2014 back in time for Tuesday when I review it here on the channel. And like I said earlier, no Payback 2015 review. I usually like to have that year-long window where I review, I wait a year to review a pay-per-view, because if I review it a couple weeks later, I know I do it for my website in written form. But the whole point of WrestleRant is to review pay-per-views in retrospect, not right after the fact. So I'm going to wait until next year to review, at the very least anyway, to review Payback 2014, or 2015, excuse me. I'll be back on Tuesday with my review of Payback 2014. But until then, guys, you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/graham.gsm.matthews, on Twitter at WrestleRant. And be sure to subscribe as well. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. All support is greatly appreciated. And in subscribing, you'll get a lot of awesome content. The hashtag SGSM videos, these very WrestleRant videos, the WrestleRant radio excerpts, the random video blogs on Friday, and so much more content. You'd be a fool not to subscribe for near daily content, so I appreciate that. But in the meantime, and in between time, folks, have a great weekend, and I'll catch you guys back right here on Tuesday with my review of Payback 2014.